Hi, everybody. Welcome to the June session under Innovations 2021. The subject is Hospitality Bounces Back, and it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to a really good conversation. I'm just taking a few moments to let people come into the room. It's certainly been an interesting time. Hospitality, of course, was pretty much dead in the water last year, or largely so. And by all accounts, it is making a comeback, not fully back yet, but we're going to hear a little bit more about that in a few seconds. I'm going to do a quick countdown from 15, and then we'll go live, okay? 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're ready to go. Hi, welcome everybody. Our subject today is hospitality, and we have a great group of people to talk with us about this. We have Dr. Louise Jones, who is the program coordinator for hospitality and tourism at the Pompea College of Business at the University of New Haven. She's been interviewed. You might have seen her on television. You might have heard her on NPR. You might have read some of her comments in newspapers. She's going to sort of give us the trajectory of where things are and where they're headed. We have Rob Sayre, who is CEO of 1888 Mills. 1888, in addition to all the product they send in the retail sphere, has been a long-time supplier to the hospitality business. And before Rob became CEO, that was the side of the business that he specialized in. And we have Buxton Midyette, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Promotions from Supima. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Great to be here.
Yeah, so Jan, I'm gonna start with you. Set the table for us, okay? What sectors of the hospitality business are coming back? What sectors are still lagging?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. And it's exciting to be here as our industry starts to reopen and figure out the new normal. So as you can imagine, you've probably seen in the news already, regional and national travel is finally getting back on track. And that includes air travel, rail travel, and bus travel is actually making some of it a comeback now as some of our events start to open. Outdoor recreation is through the roof. So you can't buy a mountain bike or any kind of personal device these days in a store because that industry has just really taken off. So anything to do with more individualized recreation or family types of recreation have really been doing amazing. In fact, they were doing well last summer as well. They had some of their best years that they've had in a long time. We also have obviously rentals up, so Airbnb, cottage rentals, condo rentals, places where people can still kind of self-isolate. We've seen those just, really doing very well. Hotels, though, are making a comeback. People are starting to travel again. Once our flights started coming back, we started to see people booking hotels. It may be a little bit different of experience in some of the hotels. You have to sort of make more reservations for things that you want to do, but the nice thing is seeing that come back. So the big two industries that have been the slowest to return are obviously large scale events and business travel. I think a lot of businesses right now are deciding what's essential and what's non-essential. And then hopefully in the long term, we'll start to get back to more of those, non-essential business travel. But conferences are starting to be rebooked. There's still some capacity and issues depending on which region or state you're in. But the good news is that people are rebooking. Smaller events are all being rebooked this summer. Weddings, family gatherings, anniversaries, all that kind of stuff are on the comeback. And so that's kind of my overview for what's going on. And obviously, I don't want to leave on a negative note, but international travel is still very chaotic. So it just really depends on the situation of vaccines in those different countries right now. And international travel, remember, is very reliant on government right? So in terms of visas and passports and stuff like that. So it adds another level and component of getting us all back on track. Because they're also experiencing furloughs and all kinds of things in those departments. So international travel, I think, will not come back to normal until about 2023
Oh,
at the very earliest, is what we're hearing. That doesn't mean that people won't begin to travel as soon as this summer. However, in terms of it being more of, no COVID restrictions, flights open, borders open, that kind of stuff, I don't think we'll see normalcy for quite a long time there. And COVID, as you know, throws us curveballs. So there's still a lot of unknowns out there, but the good news is that places are starting to open.
when you mention things like what bookings for weddings
Mhm.
and small conferences and that sort of thing, which was a substantial business for a lot of
Yeah.
hotels, right?
Yep.
It's coming back, but I assume it's still way off peak. I mean, how do you have a sense of how far off normal that business is?
Sure. So weddings, a lot of weddings were just rebooked. So actually the challenge is if you were planning to get married this year, you probably can't find a venue because all the people that wanted to get married last year have already rebooked their weddings for this year. So we're sort of seeing a bit of a backlog. It's my understanding that, some weddings they're smaller, and you may not see people flying in from international destinations into, some family may not be coming from abroad, but a lot of weddings are really getting back on track in terms of how it was. The challenge, like I said, is really the backlog of people have wanted to or just were rebooking. They weren't necessarily always canceling. And then events and conferences. So that's like, I really feel like a lot of businesses right now are deciding, what they're going to support for business travel. And it's still kind of, I believe, up in the air. And I think we're seeing way less of those kinds of conferences and events being rebooked. I think you're right. I think it's going to take a little bit longer for us to feel more comfortable with those larger events where there's large groups meeting together.
Okay. So, Rob, let me ask you, what have you seen in the past 12 months in the arc of your hospitality business at 1888?
Well, last March we saw it fall off a cliff and
Right.
pretty much stay there until we saw a little bit of a of a blip in late November, December. I think around the holidays, and as more positive news of the vaccines hit the press, and then in January it took off like a rocket ship, and it's on that trajectory right now. I mean, I would say the recovery is ferocious. It's back with vengeance. It's we're seeing, when we compare ourselves to 2019, we're doing better than 2019 at this point. So it's a much better recovery than we anticipated, for sure.
Huh. And I mean, I'm assuming, and Jan may know the answer to this, there's a certain number of properties maybe shut down entirely. I mean, were people, because they were closed, Rob, were they suddenly, we've got to reorder everything that we had because it's now out of date, or it needs to be replaced? What's driving all of that?
I think it's a good question. It's a complex question. I think there were the properties that fared best last year were more of the economy brands. They didn't necessarily have to shut down because they had a lower break-even point, and they were open for essential workers, emergency workers, and so they were giving us some business last year. And other properties, like the full service properties, a lot of those properties just completely shut down. And then when you started to see a recovery, they would, due to social distancing, you might have every other floor open.
Mm.
And they were using the PARs that they had for their linens and textiles. And now they're seeing such bookings increase dramatically. They're just preparing for normalcy. And so it's almost like every new property is a brand new opening, because they're ordering everything they can to get ready for the season. And which is good for us, but it's also a challenge because I think not only us, but all of our competitors were completely full.
Yeah, I would imagine I mean, how we know, you know, everybody in the home textiles business, actually, I think consumers generally know there are big still supply chain gaps, right? How do you balance if there's not enough supply for either side of your business, the retail or the hospitality? I mean, how do you juggle that?
It's very tricky. I mean, we we try and be fair. We forecasts really mean nothing now because they're so up and down, and you're talking 304% over forecast is what we're seeing orders being placed for, and you can't nobody can meet that sort of demand, but you just have to be open and honest. And bad news doesn't age well, so you've got to tell. We meet pretty much, our supply chain teams meet with our customer supply chain teams on a daily basis. The sales teams meeting with their counterparts on a daily basis. So you really have to just over communicate, be honest, transparent to what's going on. It's a big macro issue. And then when COVID hit India, a lot of that business went outside of India, which compounded. We have our own factories in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the United States. So we got some of that business. So did some of our competitors. People are really understanding though, for the most part. They understand that they place orders above and beyond their wildest dreams, that they don't hold us accountable for the supply chain issues, but we just have to over communicate it.
Yeah, Buxton, from Supima's point of view, your Supima fiber is part of that supply chain. What are you seeing?
Well, it's been an interesting year, no doubt, and on one side of the business, on apparel, we just saw demand drop off the cliff
Last year, right?
Last year, and really home was kind of the saving grace for Supima. And we had this on a previous session, that this was kind of the year of the towel, that it was probably one of those shining moments where people in the home business, particularly towels, were up and cheering and saying what a good year it had been, because people were nesting and spending lots of time in their homes. And so we really saw a resurgence in our home business, which would really saved us. But as Rob was saying, I mean, at that time, hospitality just really took a nosedive. And I think people were expecting that there would be a slow ramp back to business, and that it has been an immediate, it's taken off like a rocket ship, like Rob said, and that it hasn't stopped, and that people thought, oh, we'll just gradually increase. And I think that took place in the context of already strong demand, record demand in the home industry. There just wasn't that kind of necessarily as much slack capacity to meet that demand. And then with the challenges right now that India and some other producers are facing with the deadly waves of COVID, that's been just another added challenge. I mean, so we're really all kind of working through this, I guess. Excess demand is a good problem to have, but still it's something that we want to do a good job. You want to service your customers, you want people to be happy and get what they need. So it's still something we take seriously, because we love hospitality for Supima. It's a growing part of our business. It's a great way, because we're a premium fiber that we hope many people are familiar with, but there's still a lot of people that are not, that they get to go to a beautiful property and maybe enjoy a set of Supima sheets or towels for the first time, and think, well, I ought to have some for my home now, and think about upgrading. That's right. So we love it, and we've been in more of the boutique properties up to now. The Bellagio in Las Vegas, Waldorf Astoria, and Beverly Hills, a number of other top tier properties and resort properties, because it's been, I think, challenging sometimes to break into the wash programs for the major hospitality programs. But we hope that just the success we've had in the boutiques will lead to additional opportunities and a broader opportunity for Supima hospitality.
Here in the breakers in Florida.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the breakers, of course.
Our pure towel and our pure sheets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of our first. That's actually one of our first hospitality programs was at the breakers, and they seem to be really happy with it. So
Yeah.
I've been hoping to go down to product test, but it just hasn't worked
Yeah.
out.
Can we all join you?
Right.
Lovely. Well, Rob Buxton mentioned, the wash standards and whatnot. Have any of those standards, are you seeing any of them changing as we're coming through and hopefully out of the pandemic?
No, we're not seeing that change, and for good reason. I mean, antimicrobial products, for instance, in textiles for hospitality never really took off because of the wash standards. You can wash COVID off a towel. You can wash COVID off a sheet. It does not survive the commercial laundry process. So I don't see them ever changing their standards. And no.
Yeah.
Question
You're probably
answered.
cleaner there than you are at home, actually.
Yeah, well, Jan, I wanted to ask you because Buxton was talking about boutique properties and Rob was talking about how, a year ago, it was really the budget properties. When you're looking at the hotel business and the tiers of I guess, how would you frame it? I would think of it as budget, normal, or, kind of your business, tourism, Hyatt, Marriott, whatever, and then boutique. But how do you segment the market and how is each piece doing right now?
Yeah, so I mean, luxury is the luxury market you probably are familiar with in terms of certain expectations of service and quality sheets, things like that. All of those things all in one. But so then you have that market was hit really hard because it's actually often very expensive to have those facilities open and running for a variety of reasons. So some of them were hit hard in the beginning, although some of the luxury markets were able to distance people and offer more personalized services, some of the bigger companies, because they sort of had more of the staffing in place and ability to do that. So it kind of depended on the property for that. We did see, like here in Connecticut, we had several hotels actually close and they are new businesses now. And that's devastating for downtowns to have, like a Marriott that is no longer there. That's a little more accessible to middle class or middle income, folks. So some of those hotels struggled. The hotels, then we have hotels that are essentially connected to big conferences, right? So big conference center hotels struggled the most, or you see a lot of conference hotels in university towns, places like that actually had a really hard time because nobody was holding meetings. And then there's the budget travel. I think some of the budget travel places actually didn't do too bad because people were still traveling regionally. So you did still see some people staying. They would obviously seem to have preferred to use Airbnb or, places that they could be separate, or like cottages and stuff like that last summer in particular. But it depends, there's several levels. Every single hotel industry has their own, tiered types of hotels, and it would, it's a long discussion of like getting into the intricacies of that. But in general, some of the markets definitely fared better than others. The boutique hotels, a lot of them opened up, like you were mentioning earlier, to health workers. They opened up to people who were homeless and just had nowhere to go. And in fact, 2 hotels in New Haven in particular did that. They took totally different perspectives on it. And so that allowed them just to stay open. And offer some things. Sometimes universities actually had students in hotels because they needed places to isolate students. if they had COVID. So yeah, there was some really fascinating, it will be really fun to do case studies to look at all of the creative things at the different levels of hotels that the industry did to sort of just maintain. So a lot of acquisitions as well.
So is the comeback kind of rolling at the same pace across the different tiers of hotels?
So I would agree with Rob that from everything I'm hearing, the industry is being hit with a major comeback in all sectors that they were not necessarily prepared for. So what Rob was talking from sort of the product side, in the service side, we are struggling. And I know this is one of your questions, and if I'm going there too early, to stop
fine.
me.
No.
But I actually just heard it on the news this morning. I was watching the news, and they're calling it the Great Resignation instead of the Great Depression. And there's just been a mass exodus of people in April from their jobs. In hospitality in particular, it has to do with benefits. It has to do with dealing with frontline customers who haven't been pent up demand for a year and have certain expectations that everything's going to be exactly the same as when they left 18 months ago. Some of it has to do with long hours. So our industry has had some things to work on for a long time. And I think this is all it's all bringing it up right now. So yeah, interesting.
Okay. I'm Rob, and I know Rob, Jan, one of you, maybe neither of you can answer this question, because Jan, earlier you'd mentioned things like outdoor experiences and the Airbnb, and I know there's the, vacation rental by owner, that whole sector. To a certain extent, is some of that getting organized as in terms of it's not just one? I know there are a lot of properties that are just one person with the property renting it, but are there buying groups, or are there businesses starting up that are specializing in these kinds of properties that would have, be buying in greater volume, perchance?
I don't know if Rob or Buxton has an answer to that. I don't specifically know of that. I can tell you that even before COVID, millennials were more inclined to stay in an Airbnb, right? They want to pay less money for the accommodation and spend more money on the experience. And what COVID has done is make Airbnbs and places like these sort of home rentals much more mainstream. So everyone's got Airbnb now or is doing one of those similar types of things. Whether or not there's like hotel groups and stuff, I feel like that's the direction we're headed, where like places like the Midyette might actually do stuff like that, right? Where they would have different properties that are within the city versus one main property. So we were kind of headed in that direction anyway, as a form of competition for what we call a classic hotels to some of this new disruptors. But I don't know any specifics in terms of as a result of COVID. Rob or Buxton might have some other.
Rob, you have any idea?
Well, I don't know of any buying groups. I mean, they've always been a tough segment to service because, it's a homeowner and they don't necessarily know to go to a hospitality manufacturer, hospitality distributor for product. They would go to a Sam's, a Costco, a Target, a Walmart, or Amazon to buy their textiles. But what I think has happened is certain hospitality distributors, especially regional ones, are focusing on vacation homes, and we've developed marketing materials for these folks to go after that business, and curated products that we already have in our portfolio that would service that market. But I also agree with something that Jan said, that I think from a competition perspective, pre-COVID, a lot of the big brands were coming up with their answer to an Airbnb or VRBO, like Marriott Homes and Villas. And I think that we'll see what happens, but I think that might accelerate where they could offer an Airbnb type experience, but you could use your hotel loyalty program to book that, or they could be adjacent to a resort and you could use all the amenities of that resort, but stay in a home and cook with your family one night. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to watch how that evolves.
Okay.
Yeah, I think also as we see kind of more government regulation Airbnb, VRBO, I think that could bring a moment where it becomes more structured and more groups and these solutions by existing players come into play. I know I was in Europe a couple years ago and in a VRBO, which really felt like it was kind of like a hotel room, and it seemed like they had this was in Spain, they had an official plaque that it was, you know, approved by the, you know, Bureau of Tourism, and so I felt like that was probably a product of regulation, that, you know, you couldn't just have one, it had to get the government approval. So I think, you know, the industry still is in its infancy, but it obviously has picked up so much steam through this COVID year we've had.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, you know, just anecdotally, I have a sister in Oregon who has a little, like she calls it the spa house. It's right on the edge of wine country. That I think 2019 was her first year, and normally because it's up in the mountains, she closes it down right before the Christmas holidays, doesn't start taking anybody again until March. She was booked throughout the winter, mainly from people from Portland who just needed to get a, you know, just needed to drive an hour away just to get away, but someplace safe. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. And I don't know, Jan, is there any data about what percent of the market share this kind of the single owner business is grabbing from hospitality?
So I mean, you had sent this question. I actually did try to do some research on it, and I wasn't able to find any specific statistics on it. I just can tell you, I know exactly what you just described is happening right now.
Yeah.
And here in particular in Connecticut, shoreline places throughout the winter were booked because everyone was trying to get out of the cities, out of Boston and New York, and some millennials are deciding they don't want to go back. It used to be the dream was go to the city and, you know, be in that small apartment, pay all that rent. Now they're starting to say, wait, I can buy a house and live here and work from home. So there's going to be, yeah. Anyways, to go back to your question, I don't have specific statistics on it, but I can tell you that even before COVID, the hotel industry was concerned about how disruptive Airbnbs were going to be in terms of, you know, different expectations of when people are looking for accommodations, what they're willing to pay for or not willing to pay for now, and what they expect in terms of a more personalized product. So I would not be surprised if their share of the market is much bigger.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have to have the statistics in front of me. I can tell you their share of the pie is much bigger than it was pre-COVID. Yeah. So it's like I said, it's just really made it more mainstream at this point.
Right. Rob, I was surprised when you said that the hospitality properties really don't need you to be coating everything with an antimicrobial because of, you know, the high powered, high temperature wash that's killing off everything. Are there any other aspects in the way that they are selecting linens or ordering linens that has changed in the wake of COVID? Although I know there's a shortage of product generally, so maybe beggars can't be choosers at this point.
Well, that last statement is completely accurate. I mean, right now there's not even brand standards anymore. They don't care if the washcloth matches the bath towel or the hand towel, or if you have product, they will take it,
Right.
literally.
Oh, wow.
But back to the antimicrobial, you know, we've had, you know, we've got an exclusive partnership with Dow DuPont, and our antimicrobial doesn't wash off. It's a topical treatment that doesn't wash off the towel, lasts for the life of the product. Or we can put it on duvets, comforter sheets, anything. But really, for just speaking from textiles, I mean, there are antimicrobial static sprays and things that they're doing, and things that they're doing with PPE for the back of the house. For the, you know, I think it's more appropriate for the back of the house. But because of, you know, chlorine and bleach and peroxide washes at high temperatures. I mean, studies have shown you can wash off the flu, you can wash off SARS, COVID. I mean, any virus out there doesn't survive. So I don't think the properties feel they need to spend more for that.
Okay.
Change the sheets.
So if right now they are they completely in I'll take whatever you've got mode? Is anybody starting to do some planning, like this is how we think we want to start developing, or that's just not even on the board yet?
It's not on the board yet, and I think part of that is the dramatic turnover in the industry. I mean, depending on the brand, they might have made cuts to their ops or sourcing people, then they fully haven't hired them back yet. They might have made cuts to their brand people. They're fully not back yet. And, you know, again, they went from 0 to 100 at the snap of a finger. And, you know, we've got upside down supply chains that compound this, that they're just not there yet. And then it'll be interesting to see when it does come back. We're also in an inflationary period too, where all the raw materials that go into a towel, primarily cotton, everything's getting more expensive. So that usually means that for a period of time, manufacturers like us, we have to start thinking how we take cost out of the product. And the easiest way to do that is to take weight out of the product. So you might see smaller and lighter hospitality towels, for instance, in the future. We'll see what the market demands, but we're ready to meet their demand.
Well, you know, on that subject, I also wonder, do we now retreat from walking into you know, a Hilton or a Wyndham and finding 8 pillows on the bed and 7 layers of bedding that you're climbing under or throwing off the bed before you go to sleep? I mean, is that kind of something that's maybe being anticipated as a way that they will be addressing the higher costs that are coming through?
Well, I think for the most part, even prior to COVID, they really addressed that. A lot of them went to triple sheeting, and it's just much more effective for their operations, for the back of the house, for the laundry costs. I mean, I might be jumping the gun, but one of the things you have to keep in mind when you sell to a hospitality customer as opposed to a retail customer is that laundry cost for commercial laundry. And products for that cost. So I think they were pretty much on that on the bedding side already. So I don't think, you know, I think we're pretty much out of that pre-COVID.
How is a triple sheet? And you know, I'm a retail oriented layman. How is the triple sheet cheaper?
You don't have to iron.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just throw in the laundry, take it out, put it on the bed.
That's my kind of sheet right there.
I know. He's coming out of
Can
retail.
you send us all samples of that? That'd be great. We will test that out for you. You know what I've seen? I think this is so fascinating to me because I think that's really, I mean, it's not surprising to me. I've known that the industry has had very high standards in terms of, you know, linens and things like that. And what I always say to people, you're walking into a hotel is always most times cleaner than, I mean, not all the times, but, you know, I mean, your bedding and things like that are typically high temperature washed and, you know, you have a lot of precautions taken to make sure that they're very clean. What I have seen though, is that I know from house cleaning in hotels that their 2-page checklist for cleaning is now a 4-page checklist. And
oh, really?
what used to take 20 minutes to clean a room is now taking, in some cases, 40 minutes to clean a room. And that's because pre-COVID, there's certain surfaces that were always clean. But then you started thinking about like the remote and the clock, or like there's these random shelves that you may have to make sure are always wiped down every time. So it's my understanding that maybe not the sheets have very different, things that we have to do, but I do know in housekeeping in particular, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that's getting done now that was much different than in the past. And even as little as, what they're putting in the room, that stays in the room. So that's been kind of interesting. Sometimes your remote now will come in a little Ziploc bag, right? Because it's been sanitized, whereas before it might have been wiped down quick and just put there.
Or a lot
So
of things that they took out of the room that might
yeah,
not come back.
exactly. Which I kind of, I'm one of those people that loves all the little soaps and the sewing kit and the, that kind of stuff. And a lot of that stuff now, unless you're asking for it, and maybe some of the luxury brands, I'm sure, still have it. But yeah, it is interesting. We are also moving into more ideas of sustainability, where everyone doesn't have their own individual items. So, you had the soap dispensers on the wall in the bathroom that were being reused.
Mhm.
COVID kind of, made, there was a lot of things that we were doing for the environment. I think that we went maybe back a little bit, everyone getting individualized containers, straws came back, plastic bags came back. I mean, so there's some things I think we were making some positive change in terms of sustainability that now we had to individualize stuff again that we're going to have to reevaluate after COVID.
That's a good point. And so you mentioned sustainability, and Rob, I know, obviously on the retail side, that's been a big trend. Pre-COVID, how much was it factoring in to discussions about hotel linens?
It always in discussions. I mean, there's and for us, it's a great thing. I mean, we have a very large retail business, and there's a lot of things that we can take from retail and put in hospitality and vice versa. And I know that's a question later on, but I would say it was in a lot of discussions. Now, when it came to the point of paying more, we were starting to make traction, as Jan said, like pre-COVID, like, okay, let's start putting our wallets down for this, because there is a cost to it. And a lot of properties were getting ready to do that, and until COVID hit. I think I am very confident we'll get back there. I do think it's important. I think the hospitality industry, like the retail industry, had already figured out that sustainability and green there's also a savings, and it is profitable. You just might spend more here to save more here.
Right.
And in fact, I mean, we're doing a pilot. I'm not going to say with who, but we're doing a pilot on circularity, where we are picking up the textile when we sell them new textiles. We have to work with several partners to do this, but essentially we'll take their old towels back. We'll recycle them and try and manufacture new towels out of that. And there were already some things gaining traction, like recycled polyester, us looking at other fibers to replace polyester. But again, all of that has a little bit more cost to it, but the industry was open to it right before COVID hit finally, and we'll see where it goes. But I think they'll get back to it. They're in triage mode right now. They're reacting.
It's so true. Service, products, everything is in triage.
And we're hoping to see more interest, just because of Supima being a stronger fiber and having that durability, that I think, we have confidence that in the long run, that's going to be a big selling point, that once we get into those wash programs, they're going to see it perform, and last longer, for the programs.
Is there, I mean, I know it kind of launched in very high-end boutique. Is there a little more elasticity about where Supima can go in the hospitality world?
I think so, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen immediately. We're really looking at, we were talking about inflation and raw material costs, and Supima, the prices certainly has gone up, and probably will be going up. Last year we really hit rock bottom for Supima, 90 cents a pound. That was a huge buying opportunity for anyone who knew about Supima and ELS cost.
To grow Supima for the farmer?
It cost $1.20 a pound to grow, so it was a financial disaster for our growers. And one that they're still recovering from. And I think as a, partly a result of that and some other factors, that we're going to see probably one of our smaller crops ever, around 400,000 bales, which is plenty to supply, any kind of program of size. Most programs out there would be 10 to 15,000 bales. So 400,000, and that's for a major nationwide home textile program at one of the top doors, big door programs. But we'll see. I mean, I think right now we've gone from 90 cents to starting to approach $2. I think that you also have record low crops in countries like Egypt. You have issues with Chinese ELS cotton right now as well. So it's the market has definitely tightened up, and certainly anyone who's listening, watching this webinar, I think it's a time to work very closely with your suppliers and to plan and kind of lay out your kind of your needs for the coming year, so that they can supply themselves accordingly. Because the Supima, it's not, we're a kind of a made to order fiber. People are not making to spec and making Supima product and hoping to sell it. They're really buying only specifically to their needs and the orders they have.
Okay.
So I think, and that's, regular cotton is going up too.
Yeah, everything is, right? Everything. In fact, I was talking to several people on the down and feather side of the business over the past week, and most of the feathers they're byproducts from the food industry, and most of the duck and goose and the food industry is restaurant business, and a lot of the duck and goose comes from China and the rest from Europe, and the restaurant business is, because of COVID, opened up, shut down, opened up, shut. So there's just not as much byproduct because there are not as many people at restaurants eating duck and goose. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody in any aspect of this business that isn't facing higher
Right.
raw material costs, right? At all. So.
Oh, and certainly, Rob, you might be able to speak to this better than me, but shipping and transport is also a nightmare. Really challenging. Those costs, for a container have gone from $500 to $10,000. I mean, it's just really, I don't think people expected that, but that's a big challenge, and it doesn't help with your timing either for shipments.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, as you plan, Rob, around these things, and the partners that you work with on that end of the business, does anyone have a sense of when things might become more normalized, or is this expected to roll through at least the back half of the year and into next year?
Yes, we're constantly asking those questions to anyone we can, and the consensus is this will be at least into Q1 next year, probably the back end of Q1, and we'll see after that. I mean, Buxton mentioned cotton crop, and I mean that's usually when you get a read on, like, for us, cotton's 50-60% of our product costs. So it's something I look at every single day, and you don't know till the crop comes in, but what Buxton said is pretty much the consensus, that if the crop isn't as big, and we've got a lot of drought going on throughout the world, not just in California and Texas where a lot of US cotton is grown. So we'll see. In transportation, everyone we talk to, it's into Q1 next year as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the issue for us is that right now the crop's in the ground, and there's not going to be another one. We're not going to plant another one till April of 2022, and that's not going to be harvested until the fall of 2022. So it's not like you just, oh yeah, it's just, oh, we'll make some more.
Right, exactly. You know, in the fall for the next year. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is what it is. Well, speaking of shortages, Jan, you know, we keep reading about unfilled jobs, and the hospitality sector is apparently one. Hospitality and retail, actually, right? Seem to be the two sectors that are having the hardest time refilling their jobs. How much of this is an impediment to hotels fully reopening?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge impediment. And it's across the board. So I see two kind of things happening. You had people that stayed, I kind of mentioned this before, through COVID, right? So you had general managers that were working 70, 80 hours a week in order and they were doing everything. You know, there was them and maybe one security person and one housekeeper in smaller hotels. They're burnout. And so you've got a lot of people in the management level positions that stayed, that it's been crisis mode for 18 months. And so you're seeing some of those people leave because they're tired of it and they want out. So I've seen some of that. And then the other things are what I was sort of alluding to earlier, is that, you know, it's really hard for some of these hotels. They're ready to open at full capacity. They have the demand to open at full capacity. They have the regulations and policies in place, but they don't have the staff. And there's also in all of this more standards and expectations and things that are constantly changing that you have to train people on. So it's not a matter of just hiring. It's kind of like we were saying about the crops. You can't just hire someone today and then they're ready to work tomorrow. I mean, bus drivers, you know, hotel workers, restaurant workers, they need training. So at a time when we need more training, we have less workers. And I knew this was going to be a problem because normally our students all go out on internships in the summer, and I was getting the really smart HR people were contacting me already in like December, January.
December?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, because they knew this was going to be a problem. And I still today, and I'm talking, this isn't just like the little, you know, general managers or management. I'm getting from corporate offices, like Omni corporate offices. Hey, we have 200 positions we need to fill in the next week. Do you have anything? Or,
Wow.
It's really crazy right now. So it is, and it's not just hit, you know, smaller hotels. It's also hit the luxury properties. In fact, some luxury properties, you may see increased prices because they're just increasing the prices because it's kind of like they're almost trying to discourage too many people of coming back. And I hate to say that, but that's kind of how someone described it to me the other day. He was working with a property and he said, you know, we've added these extra things. And it's kind of like, if you're okay with that, then still come, but just know that these are in place, and they have to do that because they have limitations on their staff.
Wow.
So yeah, it is crazy times. It's an amazing time if you are in education and you're looking, you know, to get into a field. I think any of these fields that we're talking about, it's an amazing learning opportunity and so many abilities to cross train. So this is what I love about my students out and interns right now. Like they might be hired in housekeeping, but they're also sometimes working the front desk and to me, that's like the best experience that they could have. And what I tell them is take it. Anytime someone needs something different from you, learn that new skill and go with it, because those are the people where they're going to hire in management after.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy right now. It is definitely challenging. And we're open for business, but it's not going to look the same. And I think that's what travelers need to know. And unfortunately, this pent up demand is, we're seeing a lot of incidents of people just being nasty to frontline workers. And that's another reason that we're seeing people leave is, you know, you're not paying me enough. I'm not getting health benefits. I'm working 60 hours a week and people are yelling at me.
Yeah.
So, You really need thick skin right now, and it's an interesting time.
And we also see it, as a U.S. manufacturer, and we do have health benefits for our hourly
Right.
workers. And we are, the number changes daily, but we are very short of people. Our competitors, we have one competitor that also manufactures in the U.S. They're in the same boat. Our suppliers, spinners that that are U.S. based, they have factories that are shut down because they can't staff them. So we have all this pent up demand, and we can't service it because we don't have the people to make the product.
Yeah, same exactly.
Yeah, we're hearing about that from a lot of Supima manufacturers, that they're not they're not running, full shifts, that they're having to drop, like night shift or whatever, that they're really well below their capacity.
And that's aside from COVID or any COVID impacts, that is simply shortage of warm bodies, correct?
That's right.
But I think it is a side effect of COVID in the sense that a lot of people were home and they started rethinking, what do I want to do for a career? Or, and as they're going back, they're being pickier, or they enjoyed working from home, so they don't want to go back.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting, if you look at from like a psychological perspective too, I think young people are having more demands on expectations and what they want in a career.
Yeah, true.
It's not a bad thing, but we need them. We need them back. We need you.
I think right now too, there's a lot of COVID benefits out there that they can stay at home and weigh their options and not necessarily have an urgent need to go out and find immediate employment. Absolutely. And we're seeing it also from our, I know this hospitality, but our retail side, we have retail customers that can't get trucks to come to our warehouse and pick up product, or can't get trucks from their own warehouses to their stores.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pervasive throughout the supply chain.
Huh. Well, kind of speaking of the two worlds that you play in, the retail and the hospitality, I'm curious about, as a company that does a lot of product development, and when we were talking before we got started, you mentioned the innovation center that you guys have. Are there developments that are made for hospitality that cross over into retail and vice versa? How do those cross currents work? And does that happen very often?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time. We have our product development team is really business unit agnostic. They work with the sales folks and the business leaders of those business units. And our three main business units are retail, hospitality, and institutional, which is primarily healthcare. But from retail to hospitality, I can just think of a few examples off the top of my head. It's a patent we have. It's a technology called FiberTone, and it's pervasive. We have a whole pool collection for hospitality, for pool towels and beach towels, our FiberTone collection. And what it is it allows color to go through a commercial laundry, which is very bleach intensive. So you can, and years ago, I used to do demos of this with actual bleach until you get a headache doing that 8 hours a day. Demonstrating this technology, but so that translates well. Hospitalities can take these colored beach towels and throw them in with their white sheets and their white towels and not worry about what's going to come out of the laundry. But that translates well into like kitchen textiles, where you can, especially during COVID, we saw an uptick of this in our retail kitchen, our FiberTone, because you just pour bleach on it and you can clean. And you still have this, this beautiful colored towel. So that's one instance. From hospitality, we have a boutique and lifestyle collection we call Mill and Thread, and it's just a curation of products that fit that type of property. And a lot of that just translates. Our PD people are, wait a minute, this translates well into retail too. And they came out with a similar, not changing the product a whole lot, to go into retail. And then, retail is really more obviously design intensive than hospitality, but we can pick up some of those design cues and especially in bedding, and put them into hospitality. It does translate well. In fact, pre-COVID, I mean, retail, you have these color trends every year.
Right.
Some of those eventually trickle into hospitality, but maybe 5 years later. Like,
That's funny.
gray was really big a couple years ago in retail. Everything was the color gray. And then right before COVID, we actually had properties, big brands adopt like gray towels for the room.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it.
So
That's
Yeah, we've heard that the colors, at least in home, have really been going through the roof. That everybody wants colors. I don't know if it's because they're redecorating, or they're stocking their VRBO, but it'll be interesting to see if that kind of strong trend, seeps through to hospitality. Have you seen that on your retail business, Rob? The colors popping.
oh yes. We see we talk about New York market. I mean, every market we had different colors that we're showing or popping, and it just seemed that the design life cycle was so short. This 6 months later, this color's in, this color's out. Or a hospitality, obviously the products are predominantly, a predecessor of mine used to say, you can have any color you want so long as it's white. I mean, and again, that's due to the laundry process of these of the hotels. But yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, we were starting to see even hotels take on color. We'll see if that comes back, but.
well, as you said, right now they're taking anything. So I guess
This is a time to introduce, like.
Yeah, it's an inadvertent pilot program.
That's right.
To see how things are going. So we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I'm, Jan, going to ask you, from the industry standpoint, and you said something about international. You don't think many people don't think that's going to be back in a real way until sometime in 2023. On the domestic end for the hotel chains, and I don't know, I guess nobody's building new right now, are they?
Well, I mean, there are definitely acquisitions and people building new. In fact, we have an alum from our university who is opening a new Omni in downtown Boston, Seaport.
Oh, okay.
They're opening this fall, which is, and actually it's, as he says, it's not the worst time to open something brand new because everyone's just kind of restarting. So in a sense, you're just, it's not actually the worst thing, and people are looking for new products. We saw this in there's some new smaller airlines that have cropped up because people are doing regional travel, and now is actually the time for you to sort of start that. So I actually think we are going to see some new products. There were definitely businesses that were able to bought out some of the different hotels. And so I actually think that we will see some new folks emerge through all of this. But some of the brands that we're all used to, I think they're very quickly getting back on track as soon as they figure out supply chain issues, and then also workers, which is a big challenge right now. I actually think that we're going to see quite a recovery as long as they were able to stay somewhat stable until now. I think they're in really good shape moving forward.
So growth continues, like comeback growth. When do we kind of get beyond comeback, reopen to smooth sailing, normal running at a pace?
So I wish I had a magical answer for that. Yeah, I wish I had a magical, and I actually now feel like I don't even want to answer this anymore, because in the past I'll say that, and then COVID throws us like, this, oh, there's a new variant, or we need a new pill now or something. But I mean, obviously more people getting vaccinated and the numbers of people being hospitalized and ultimately ending in deaths, as those numbers drastically go down, we're going to see our industry normalize. And that's going to be dependent on other countries as well, right? To get kind of to the same levels in terms of international. I really don't think there's going to be anything normal about this summer. I apologize because you guys all talk in quarters and I talk in college semesters. So I realized that as we were talking earlier, but I'm really hoping domestically for next summer that things have normalized a little bit more. It's going to give time, like once we get through this really, really, really busy season for hospitality in the summer into the fall, it's usually our busiest time for a lot of places. I think you're going to see a lot more strategic planning for, out. Right now we're in survivor mode, and it's just like, what do we do to stay open? How do we keep people happy so they'll come back next year? So I really think next summer we're going to see less of those restrictions of like having to reserve things and stuff like that. And then I do think it'll be more normal in 2023, but what's going to happen is as people from the US start to go abroad, people international are going to want to come to the US. So it's actually a good thing. I think as soon as we start to kind of figure it out for nationally, we're going to see that increase in international travel because people are going to want to come here again. And so that's going to be a whole other set of things to think about.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Buxton. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
being part
you.
of this. This session is being recorded and will be posted up on our site in case you want to watch it again or share it with your colleagues. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jennifer.
so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.